Welcome back to Whip Around on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. It's 3 p.m. Eastern. It's August 30th. And we're going to do a little Big Ten Blitz later in the show and bring in my colleague, Allen Trieu. Y'all might remember we used to host a podcast, the notorious B1G recruiting podcast. So we're going to talk about all the recruiting classes in the Big Ten, what we like about them, maybe some major targets for some of the schools, not maybe for sure, major targets on some of the schools. But before that, let's talk about some other developments nationally on the recruiting trail. Richmond, Virginia, Verena High, four-star linebacker Kavian Keys committed to North Carolina over the weekend. The Tar Heels hold off Penn State, Texas A&M. They hold off Penn State. They may still have to hold off Texas A&M later for another physical, hard-hitting linebacker. As Mack Brown and company work on their fourth straight top 20 recruiting class, this is a really good linebacker haul for the Tar Heels, as Keys joins Caleb Lavallee, who's played well in his first two games this year, and I think he plays extremely fast. And then Amari Campbell, who's also from Virginia. That's a sneaky good linebacker haul for North Carolina when you look at this class that Mack Brown and company have in the fold. I like the violence the Keys and Campbell play with, and I think that all three of these guys, Lavallee included, show that they can be pass rushers from the second level. Keys has a lot of upside. He can really run. North Carolina moving forward, David Hobbs, top 247 defensive lineman, is really their only target as they battle Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama for him. And I think that they are going to perhaps maybe go down the defensive back road moving forward as well, perhaps at the portal in that regard. South Carolina has 24/7 Sports number 15 recruiting class right now after landing top 247 edge rusher Desmond Umeozulu yesterday on this YouTube channel here. And I think if you talk to people around Columbia, they view him as a potential starter right away. Same goes with fellow four-star defensive lineman Montague Rames. Those are guys that I'm expecting to be on the field early in Columbia. Five-star quarterback Jayden Davis out of Charlotte Providence Day School there, 2024 signal caller. He's scheduled his third visit to Michigan since June. He'll be in Ann Arbor when the Wolverines host Hawaii. He may be at the Georgia-Oregon game this weekend in Atlanta. He was at North Carolina's opener where he saw Drake May and company churn out over 600 yards of total offense against Florida A&M. North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan well positioned in this recruitment. So are programs like LSU, Clemson, and Alabama. But Michigan, 3 visits going back to June. The Wolverines definitely have momentum in this recruitment. And it's going to be J.J. McCarthy's first start inside the Big House. And Jayden Davis and his family have really hit it off with J.J. McCarthy and his family. So be a cool moment for Jayden Davis to get up there and see J.J. make his first career start. But they've really hit it off with Coach Harbaugh there. Like his track record with quarterbacks. They like the offense. They like Michigan and what it stands for off the field. So Michigan very much a major contender for the top uncommitted quarterback in the 2024 recruiting cycle. Hakeem Williams, we talked about him last week on Wiltfong Whiparound. He is going to be at the Florida State LSU game, as we said, and the Seminoles have a lot of momentum in this recruitment with Hykeem. Some think that ultimately he'll end up in Tallahassee as long as Florida State does what they're supposed to do or what they think they can do and play well against LSU. Texas A&M is where my crystal ball is right now. The Aggies have been well positioned for as long as any program for the Fort Lauderdale Stranahan standout. But a program that we kind of sleep on or don't mention as much, but they've certainly been a school that Hykeem's had high on his list, is Pitt. He's going to be at Pitt in a couple weeks for the Tennessee game. This will be his third time visiting with Pat Narduzzi and his staff. And Taekwon Underwood has really just done a fantastic job of making Pitt a major contender for Hakeem Williams. They're going to get him back up to campus. And he's going to make his college decision on September 23rd. And as Andrew Ivan said on Preps to Pros, we'll see if that's the end of the recruitment or really just round one. Tamari and Parker, the top 50 overall recruit in the top 247, recent decommitment from Penn State. The Nittany Lions are going to continue to battle there, but I think that's kind of uphill for them. He's got several visits locked in for the fall. He's got 6 sacks through his first 2 games, so playing at a high level, easy to see why he's so coveted. He's going to take an official visit to Florida the weekend, October 15th. He's in the process of lining up Clemson the weekend of October 22nd, and Tennessee is locked in for the first weekend in December. He also plans to be at Clemson next weekend for their home game. He's going to be at the Tennessee home game when they bring in Alabama, and he's going to get down to Texas A&M when the Aggies host Ole Miss. So the Aggies are a program making a move later in the process for Tamari and Parker, who came into this season with 26.5 sacks over the 2 campaigns prior, but playing at another level as a senior. As we teased at the beginning, let's do a little Big Ten Blitz and bring in my colleague, Allen Trieu. Allen, what's happening, brother?
Football is in the air, man. We got a little taste last weekend, but Big Ten play gets really going this week.
Yeah, it starts first big game of the season is in the Big Ten. Purdue hosting Penn State on Thursday night, right up the road from me in West Lafayette, and we'll talk about those 2 programs in a little bit. Let's start at the top of the Big Ten standings with Ohio State. The Buckeyes have 20 commits. It's the number 6 class in the country right now. And from my vantage point, Alan, they're really working on 3 guys that they'd love to see join the fold. Mateo Uiagalelei, Damon Wilson, and Keon Keeley. They're all 5-star defensive linemen, edge rushers, difference makers at the point of attack. And Ohio State's at the top or near the top for all of them. I think talking to sources and various people about all 3 of these recruitments, I would say that Ohio State has the best shot to land Mateo, Damon, and then Keon, but we'll see what happens after Keon takes his official visit this weekend for Notre Dame for that top 5 clash at night in the shoe. As we know, Ohio State, they're going to watch a lot of senior film on guys. Perhaps they take another defensive back or just a senior riser in general. So Ohio State will be grading folks' senior film and looking for guys that can help them win a national championship. I think and when you look at their class right now, they have a lot of guys that can help them win the national championship.
Yeah, it's funny that a few years ago, Brian Hartline was this new coach on the scene, and you wondered how he would do on the recruiting trail. And now he's quickly established himself as one of the top recruiters in the country, definitely in the conference, though. And this wide receivers class is just going to fall in line with all of the other great ones that he has already signed. Just an embarrassment of riches at that position when you look at Brandon Inniss, Noah Rogers. I know there's some buzz that they may have to work to hang on to Carnell Tate, although I'm hearing right now that there's more buzz than there is actual concern over Carnell Tate. So I think they've done a really, really good job. They obviously recruit nationally, but I actually think that they've done a pretty exceptional job within the state of Ohio in this class. And when you look at how some of those guys have started off their seasons, Arvell Reese, big first game, Malik Hartford with some splash plays, I mean, top to bottom and starting in close with their home state and casting a wide net. I think this is just another typical ho-hum top 5 awesome class for Ohio State.
Yeah, Ohio State always ranks near the top of the NCAA's list when looking at top offenses in college football. And this is one that keeps the standard moving forward with Brandon Inniss, Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, and Bryson Rogers at wideout. Jelani Thurman is one of the top tight ends in the country. Luke Montgomery leads an offensive line haul that was highly coveted. Then you flip over. You brought up Malik Hartford. Safety was a big position in need for the Buckeyes this cycle. And they landed the number 1 safety in the country last year in Sonny Styles, but they needed to add more depth around him. And Malik Hartford and Jayden Bonsu are guys that really check that box for the Buckeyes. And then their running back in this class, Mark Fletcher, 6'1", 225 pounds. I think that when you get around Mark Fletcher, you see that he's got a special personality too. He's got those intangibles you're looking for. But over 200 yards rushing, just a massive first game for American Heritage in their win on ESPN. This is a class that's really coming together nicely for Ohio State. And like I said at the top, they hope to land a couple more 5-star defensive linemen before they finish this thing off.
Yeah, you know, one guy we didn't mention there that I think needs to be brought up in this defensive line class is Will Smith Jr. He's a legacy guy. I think when he was taken, it was, some people thought it was because of the legacy thing. He has established himself as a really outstanding player, and I think he's going to be a guy that we reevaluate during this season. I know they want to add more difference makers in that room, but Will Smith is not a guy to sleep on in this class. I think he has a chance to be a really good player for them now that he's growing into more of a interior prospect. And when you go around, even just last weekend was when I was at a high school game, somebody brought up Larry Johnson to me. He's one of the position coaches in this conference that I think when you talk to high school coaches and recruits parents, he's one of the ones that really commands the most respect in the conference.
Penn State, Alan, they finished with a top 10 class last year, number 8. They're sitting at number 12 right now. And from my vantage point, this is pound for pound the best offensive line class in America.
I was going to bring that up with obviously a guy like Alex Birchmeier leading the way. But when you go back and you look at some of the outstanding classes that Penn State has signed, I think offensive line is maybe one of the positions where you felt like maybe they could have done a little bit better in some years. And so this is huge for them, I think, to sign this type of offensive line class. I think there's difference makers there, and I think it's a position they needed to fortify, and I think they've done a really, really good job with that in this class, as you mentioned.
Yeah, Alex Birchmeier is the number 1 guard. Jayden Williams, when you're talking about the top tackles in the country, he's certainly right there. And then I think that if you ask people around Happy Valley, they'll tell you that Anthony Donka is one of the steals of this class, and they expect him to be a 3-year starter or so for them. In State College, Tony Rojas is one of the fastest second-level defenders. He'll keep the tradition going of linebacker U. They flip Elliott Washington from Alabama, and then they have 2 defensive backs that I think are electric, and teammates down there at St. Thomas Aquinas and King Mack and Conrad Hussey. And then I just get the sense that Jamal Lyons is that 6'4", 255-pound defensive lineman that they've just done a terrific job of developing historically under Coach Franklin and company. And I wouldn't be surprised if we look up in 3-4 years and he's one of the premier defensive linemen in the Big Ten. And Tamir Robinson's another athletic edge guy that they have in the fold. Moving forward, Alan, I think that they would like to land another defensive back. Zion Taylor is one that I'm going to log a 24/7 Sports crystal ball for, joining Brian Doan, our colleague. And then offensive line, Samson Okunlola, they're one of several schools that are still trying to chip away there and make a move for the 5-star. From Connecticut, Joseph Miopi is a defensive lineman from Archbishop Carroll in Washington, D.C. And then Roderick Pleasant from California, one of the fastest players in the country. Those are major targets for Penn State moving forward. Is there anything else about this Nittany Lions class catching your eye?
Yeah, you talked about some of the defensive backs. I had a chance to see Elliott Washington down at Future 50, and I thought that was a really good get. One-time Alabama commit. There was a lot of favorable buzz coming out of East Lansing, where you thought Michigan State had a good chance to flip him, especially after he visited the Spartans. So that one is a nice pickup for Penn State. I liked what I saw out of him down in Florida. And then I think the guy that has a chance to really kind of make or break this class is the quarterback, Jackson Smolik. He's one of the more interesting stories in this entire conference, through really, really well this offseason. So I know we're going to watch him closely this fall to see if that translates into the games, because he's dealt with some injuries. But when you look around the conference and you look at some of the guys who were kind of late takes at quarterback, a guy like Peyton Thorne has really helped Michigan State. Even a guy like Trace McSorley initially at Penn State wasn't this, blue chip ballyhoo type prospect who really elevated his class based on his play. I think Jackson Smolik is a guy who, if he turns out to be a hit, really can take this class up to the next level, because they really have everything else in this group. And he was sort of the missing piece as they looked for a quarterback through this cycle and needed to fill that spot after the decommitment.
Michigan State coming off a hell of a season, including a Peach Bowl victory. They have the number 23 class in the country, as Mel Tucker and his staff try and finish in the top 25 for a second cycle in a row. They're in the thick of it for Samson Okunlola, 5-star offensive tackle. They're still looking for their first wideout. Tayshawn Lyons from California has kind of emerged as their top guy right now. He's a touchdown waiting to happen. Notre Dame trending on the crystal ball for him, but we'll see if Michigan State can make a move. And then the Spartans looking to flip some defensive backs. Ryan Yates, who they were strongly positioned for, who's committed to LSU. Michigan State covets. Dalen Austin also committed to LSU from California. Those are some guys that they're trying to chip away at. Perhaps they take another running back as well if they can find the right one. But when you look at this class right now, 13 commits, and I love what they're doing in the front seven, AT.
Yeah, they've really flipped around the recruiting there. I think you and I have always had great respect for what Michigan State did under Mark D'Antonio. But when during the time that we've covered Big Ten recruiting, we talked about Michigan State trying to flip SEC commits and having a chance to do that, or then getting guys like David Hicks interested in the program, and you look at their official visitors list, even some of the guys they didn't get, just to get those guys up to East Lansing, I think is a fantastic job by Mel Tucker and his staff. They brought in Brandon T. Jordan, pass rush specialist. They bring in Marco Coleman on the defensive line. You don't know sometimes initially how long it's going to take for that to pay dividends on the recruiting trail. But as you mentioned, immediately it did when they get Andrew DePape early in the class. That was a little bit unexpected at the time. They get by Joe in the class. They just picked up Jalen Thompson. And so those hires have certainly paid off immediately for Michigan State. I think a really good class top to bottom. And when you look at the things that they've done evaluation wise, and see how some of those players have played early in the season, a guy like Hedrick Riscano at running back off to a huge start. I think it shows that not only can they go toe-to-toe for some top recruits, but they've dug out some nice finds as well.
Michigan State went from 2-5 in 2020 to 11-2 in 2021, and a lot of that was because of the magic that they were able to get out of the portal and then scheme those guys in correctly and coach them up well on Saturdays. But now we see Coach Tucker taking a more traditional approach. They're certainly going to go to the portal for immediate difference makers, but they want to build it up grassroots through recruiting and had a top 25 class last year, top 25 class this year. A lot of guys in the front seven that make plays behind the line of scrimmage. By Joe, Jalen Thompson are factors behind the line of scrimmage. And then Jordan Hall, I think he's going to be a 3-time captain at IMG Academy. Now, when you brought up Mark D'Antonio, Jordan Hall just kind of screams that era of Michigan State football. He's the type of second-level defender that anybody would covet. Michigan State beat out some powerhouse programs for him, got on him early, got him to campus several times, and there he was committing to Michigan State over Florida, Notre Dame, and several others.
Yeah, I like the offensive line class here too. Chris Kapilovic has done a really good job of coaching those guys. I think when you look at some of Kenneth Walker's success a year ago, the offensive line did a great job there, and that's translating over into this class. I think a couple of guys who could see some senior year re-evaluations. Cole Dellinger was a nice win for them. Obviously, his brother's down at LSU, Clay Whedon out of Florida. I think Chris Kapilovic in a short amount of time has established himself as one of the top recruiters on this staff.
Northwestern has a top 25 class right now, Alan. They're sitting at number 25. Moving forward, I think that the Wildcats, Smith Snowden is their biggest priority, a kind of an electric defensive back. He's got 10.5 speed in the 100-meter dash. He's a high priority as they battle BYU in Utah. They had him in for an official visit in the summer, trying to get him back for a game. He's talked about that, and maybe they still chip away at a guy like Jordan Sanford, who recently committed to Texas Tech, who they like a lot. But defensive back is probably a place where they would try and take one more. Smith Snowden's the guy. Running back like Michigan State is a position that I could see them go after another running back, maybe even another wideout. But this class is pretty much done.
Yeah, I think when you look at all the classes in the Big Ten, this is the one that probably enters the fall as the most complete. Like you said, they're sitting in a good position to just try to chip away at some guys or take a best available or do some senior evals, but there's not a huge a bunch of needs here as they enter fall. And I think that's by design. That's the way Northwestern tends to like to do things. When you look at this defensive line class, I think that's what stands out right away. You know, you go down to Texas and get a guy like Ashton Porter. You get Michael Kibani out of the state of Ohio. You go into St. Louis, beat out some other Big Ten schools for Tyler Gant. Mason Robinson, a good get out of the Southeast. I think just the defensive line class itself is really good, but when you look at the front seven, you add in a guy like Nigel Glover, they have really fortified themselves in that part of their defense.
You say defensive line, I say offensive line, AT, and Kurt Anderson is one of the best recruiters in the country that people don't know about. He continues to land elite players, big-time players for Northwestern at the point of attack, beating powerhouse programs year in and year out for guys and doing that again this year. Jordan Knox, he may ultimately end up becoming one of the best centers in college football. Dylan Senda goes into the state of Michigan and beats the Wolverines and the Spartans for him this cycle. Alexander Deuce is a young man from out west that was highly recruited at the position as well. So Northwestern, they've kind of become a smash-mouth football team. Anthony Bursa, another one from Joliet Catholic there in Chicagoland. 4 more offensive linemen coming into the fold for Northwestern, and Kurt Anderson is as energetic and as strong a relationship builder of a recruiter as there is in the country at any position, and he continues to do a terrific job for Northwestern. Then Chico Hull is a 6'5", 220-pound tight end. Kind of saw his recruitment blow up, and he's with the Wildcats as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. Kurt Anderson has done a really, really great job as the offensive line coach there. And it's one thing to get these guys, but the ones that he's gotten have turned out so far. Peter Skoronski is everything that we thought he would be. Josh Preby was kind of a similar win to what Dylan Senda was this year. You go into the state of Michigan and beat some other in-state programs there and some Big Ten programs for him. And those guys are all, playing. So not only are they getting top offensive line recruits, but they're developing them. And I think that that's been huge for where this program's going. Because like you said, they like to run the football. You saw what they did last week with Evan Hull and Cam Porter, and it all starts up front. Kurt Anderson's doing a fantastic job.
Kurt Anderson's first year at Northwestern, the team couldn't block a soul. So they've really turned around their play on the field, and they've done so through recruiting and player development. Another program that has no problems ever recruiting offensive line, Allen, is Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes sitting at number 27 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting rankings. Their class is headlined by five-star offensive tackle Jayden Proctor, the number 2 player nationally at the position. This is another class that's pretty close to being done. Hawkeyes pushing hard for 2 other guys right now. Asa Newsom's an in-state athlete recruit that they're battling Minnesota and Stanford for. And then Jordan Allen's an edge rusher from the state of Kansas, who Kansas State is probably the competition for. But this is a class that, again, the bell cow players are on the offensive line. Jayden Proctor, and then came to the Hoosier State and got 2 of the best here, and Trevor Lauck and Leighton Jones.
Yeah, and Iowa's a program that we used to talk about as a developmental program, which they still are, but they would take a lot of sleeper kind of guys. It was never a class that you expected to finish inside the top 25 to 30, but now they're doing that. So you combine what they're doing on the recruiting trail in getting Jayden Proctor a year after they get Xavier Nwankpa and some of the other top recruits that they've gotten with their history of development. And I think that's a dangerous combination for the rest of the conference. They still take some guys that are some sleepers. And I think this class has some of that. I really like John Nestor and Zach Lutmer in the secondary, 2 really good athletes. That's a position that they've almost consistently found diamonds in the rough at. David Calker, another defensive lineman with a lot of upside, who kind of emerged later in this cycle. Ben Cuter made Andrew Ivins' freak list. He's a wrestler. He's a multi-sport guy, kind of a classic Iowa recruit at linebacker, who I think still has a chance to go up even more this season. He's a bona fide potential early playing time kind of guy for them in the front 7.
Michigan at number 28 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting standings. They have 14 commits in the fold right now. They're one of the more active teams moving forward when I look at who they're targeting. There's a lot of targets still out there in play for the Wolverines. Target numero uno is obviously Nicholas Harbor, the number 1 athlete in the country, five-star, who Michigan is his recruitment is one where it's kind of evolved into, you're going to want to recruit this young man on offense. In Michigan, they were kind of ahead of the curve there with the coaches that have been involved in the recruitment of Nicholas Harbor, with Ron Bellamy leading the charge. Grant Newsome also being someone that's built a relationship with Nicholas Harbor. You have the receivers coach and the tight ends coach that he's already got a report with. He's got an excellent relationship with Jim Harbaugh, and his family does as well. And he's been to Michigan before, going to come back the weekend of September 23rd for his official visit. South Carolina and LSU are definitely other programs that have had some momentum in this recruitment, but Michigan's kind of come at him from the right angles, and I think that they're in an interesting spot going into these officials. South Carolina is going to get the first official, then Michigan, and then LSU's locked in for October 7th. So we'll see how those trips go. Offensive line is still a major position of need for Michigan, Allen. I think that top 247 offensive tackle DJ Chester is one I'm kind of keeping close tabs on with Michigan and Chester. His mom's an educator. He's been up before. The Wolverines are a really good fit for him, and he's certainly high on Michigan. He'll be back for the Michigan State game. Spencer Fano is a top 247 offensive lineman that's going to go on a mission before playing college football, but he's got an official lined up for Michigan on October 29th, and Michigan's in the thick of that one. Caleb Lomu has visited before. His parents loved it. He's expected back on an official down the road. And Nathan Afabi from the state of Georgia is an offensive tackle that Michigan likes a lot and is prioritizing. So 4 key offensive line targets Michigan, I wouldn't suspect they'll swing and miss on all four of them. I think they're well positioned going into official visits, so we'll see what happens. Chris Peel is an athlete recruit from Charlotte, Jayden Davis' teammate. He's currently scheduled to be at the UConn game, I believe, for his official, but maybe that changes to Hawaii. Top 247 defensive lineman Caden McDonald's taking his official for Hawaii. And then Jair Hill, I know you're you have some insight on that recruitment, but I think Michigan leads for Jair Hill, right, Alan?
Don't know. I think Illinois is making that one interesting. Illinois, he was just back at Illinois. They were his first offer. He was at their first game last year. He's at their first game this year. They've sent just about every staff member that they have to his school at some point. So Illinois is making it interesting. Washington has made it interesting. I think he wants to maybe take a look at Auburn as well. I think Michigan's certainly one of the leaders. I don't know if I'm ready to declare Michigan the leader for Jair Hill just yet, but they're certainly in the thick of it for him. I think they have a chance with Tamari Harkless as well. He's talked about trying to set up an official. That hasn't happened yet. Defensive tackle out of Kentucky. He's got Ole Miss coming up this weekend, Auburn the weekend after that, and then Michigan and Louisville are two schools that he's talking about visiting. So that would be a nice win just to get him on campus and see if they can pull a rabbit out of their hat there with another defensive tackle as they did the last couple of cycles.
When you talk about programs that do the best job of developing defensive linemen, Michigan is a school that should get more love. I just feel like, you turn around and you look at them in the defensive linemen they put out. Aiden Hutchinson, first round. David Ajabo, second round. Woody Pay in the first round, the cycle before that. It's a program that's had several first round. Rashawn Gary, another first rounder. You look at this class and you see maybe the next wave of guys, and they have a certain body type. Enau Etta, who's going to play in the All-America Bowl, 6'4.5", 260. Collins Achiampong, 6'7", 254. Those are guys that I could really see develop into great players. Brooks Bauer played on ESPN over the weekend, 6'6", 270 pounds. And then this kid from France with Brandon Collier's group, I believe, Merritt Kumba, 6'4", 230. These are guys with some serious defensive line traits going to a school that has a great track record recently of developing high-end defensive linemen.
Yeah, not all of those guys. Some of them were Rashawn Gary, Aiden Hutchinson type All-American recruits, but not all of them were. Kwity Paye was the guy that they had to find and develop. David Ojabo was pretty raw coming out of high school. Josh Uche wasn't this big-time recruit, and they've developed some of those guys into NFL draft picks and NFL contributors. So I think that this class, there's potentially more of the same there. And as you look at this class moving forward, I would keep in mind, because I get asked all the time, how come Michigan isn't ranked higher right now in recruiting coming off the year they had? I would keep in mind that Michigan almost every year towards the end of the cycle lands a couple of guys that we didn't expect them to get. They flip somebody, Mason Graham was a flip. Rayshawn Benny was a late flip. Nobody had them in it for Darius Clemens until much later in the cycle last year. Michigan seems to do really well down the stretch. So if they have another good season in the fall this year, I think there's always room for some surprises with Michigan. They seem to do it every single cycle.
As we talked about at the top, the Big Ten season will be underway Thursday night when Purdue brings in Penn State. Purdue coming off a 9-win season, including an exciting Music City Bowl victory over Tennessee. It's the best season of the Jeff Brom era. And they have, at this point, they have 18 commits, a lot of Hoosier State flavor.
Yeah, I think they are getting their recruiting back to where it was when they first came in. They had those first few classes with the Rondale Moores and Karlaftis and David Bell, and then maybe hit a little bit of a lull, and now I think it's picking back up. I really, really like this class. There might not be a George Karlaftis or a Rondale Moore in this class, but I think it's very balanced, especially on the D-line. You mentioned some Hoosier State flavor. Kendrick Gilbert was a big pickup this week. I think Micah Carter and Sadiq Clemens are two guys who could be difference makers out of the state of Kentucky. Will Helt, probably going to be an edge for them out of Carmel, Indiana. The guy in this class on that list that I think has the best, maybe the best chance to rise up is George Burhan. I mean, I think he's fantastic. Great athlete, has a great track background. Purdue, I think, has done a good job of using their tight ends, but this guy, I think, brings some dimensions to them. Anytime that some programs like Iowa and Iowa State want you as a tight end, that's usually a pretty good sign. Purdue beat those schools for George Burhen. He's the one on that list that I would watch. He's one of my favorite kind of sleeper guys in the whole conference.
Yeah, George Burhen led his team to the state championship game as a junior. Got a chance to see him work out in the spring, and he has a lot of bounce to his game as a tight end prospect. And certainly I could see him, as you said, be a guy that stretches the field and is a big play tight end and just a mismatch for programs, and big recruiting win for Purdue to beat Iowa, among others for him. Purdue, they're going to have some recruits on campus this weekend, AT. About close to 20 commits, or close to 20 prospects could be there. A lot of them commits, but they're going to have some key 24s on campus, guys with offers. Jaden Hart's a running back from Michigan City. JoJo Edmond, who I saw play over the weekend, who we got to get ranked this week, had an interception against Detroit King, also scored a touchdown in that showdown of Midwest powerhouses. He earned an early offer from Purdue in camp. He's expected there. And then Jaden Wright's a running back from Kankakee, Illinois, Bishop McNamara, who Purdue's also targeting early. And then maybe the state's two best receivers in the 2024 class, Mylan Graham and Bronte Johnson, out of Fort Wayne. But I don't think it's going to be a sellout crowd at Ross-Ade Thursday night. Going to be a lot of energy in there with Penn State coming to town, and an opportunity with Purdue, who's basically done recruiting here in 2023, to get off and running in 2024.
Yeah, I think it's huge to get some of those guys on campus, especially the Mylan Grahams and the Bronte Johnsons, who now have offers from all over the country, to get those guys on campus early in the season. Mentioned at the top that they've done this before in wide receiver recruiting when they've gotten Rondell Moore, David Bell, Milton Wright. Those were some big recruiting victories. They can do that again in 2024. I think it'll be huge for them, and I think they certainly have the pedigree and the history at that position to be able to sell those guys.
Minnesota has 18 commits right now, Alan. 7 of them are from in-state. I can't remember a year where I've seen under PJ Fleck Minnesota go home cooking, but these are guys that they think can help them win the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you know what? I was there for their camp this summer, and it's nice because they can pad those guys up and get after it. And I thought Jerome Williams and Greg Johnson looked like two sure bets to be starting on that offensive line someday. They've done a really good job of evaluating and developing that position with Brian Callahan, doing an exceptional job with guys like Daniel Fa'alele, et cetera. I like that they've, when they first came in, you think of PJ Fleck, you think of this hype and this flash and all of the things he does. But I like the way they approach recruiting. They still evaluate a lot of guys at camp. There were several guys that they offered that day that were 2023s that they got into the class, a guy like tight end Sam Peters. So they don't, they don't just get out and start spraying offers. They do a thorough job in evaluation. I think this class shows that. They've had some good wins. I really like Carter Menz, a defensive lineman they got out of the Dakotas that I think can be a difference maker for them. They came into Michigan and beat out some schools for Darius Taylor, the running back out of Walled Lake Western. And at the time, he wasn't viewed as this giant win. It goes out first week, runs for over 300 yards and 6 touchdowns, breaks a bunch of school records. That over time here, as the season moves on, may prove to be one of the best victories for them in this cycle.
I think Zaquan Bryan is going to be the guy in this class that emerges as one of the best players in the Big Ten. 5'10", 180-pound cornerback from Savannah. He can run, sub-11 guy in the 100-meter dash. He's a physical tackler. He takes the ball away from the other team, but he's going to have the speed to be able to come in and run alongside those great receivers that places like Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State recruit. And Zaquan Bryan is a pivotal recruiting win for Minnesota as they've started to really have some major success under Coach Fleck and company and build some consistency with that program.
Absolutely. And they've, like I said, they've done a really, really good job of development. And they've had, you look at some of the NFL draft results, you look at the victories on the field. I mean, even that first class that they took with them from Western Michigan, like some of those guys are still playing. Tanner Morgan, key starter for them, John Michael Schmitz, one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He's an All-American at this point. Those guys were committed to this staff at Western Michigan. It's kind of hard to believe, but when you look at what they've done in a relatively short period of time, I think, like I said, they've shown that it's not just hype and flash. There is real substance behind what they do there in the Twin Cities.
Program on the opposite end of the spectrum right now in Nebraska, coming off a tough opening season loss to Northwestern where they blew a double-digit lead in Ireland, and if there was a program in the country where the play on the field is going to matter most on the recruiting trail, Nebraska would be the school that I would vote first. And although I think that they have a solid class right now, they just need to bounce back on the field and play well here. And I know people are already looking ahead to their next opportunity, their next big game against Oklahoma, but they got a chance to get healthy the next 2 weeks and win a couple games and build up some momentum going into the Sooners and then have a bye week. But if they don't play well, nothing that we say about this class at this point is going to matter. Landing a guy like Malachi Coleman, the number one player in the state, top 247 athlete, who I have forecasted in Nebraska, but a place like Oklahoma, certainly making me nervous about that pick. The way Nebraska, they got to play better. They've lost 8 straight games being decided by less than a touchdown, I believe, or maybe longer. Is it 10? What's the streak there? It's not good, and they need to change their fortunes on the field.
Yeah, no doubt, and I think you said everything there that Husker fans already know. It's kind of it's a gloomy feel around Nebraska right now, but if there is a positive light at the moment, I do think that this class is good. You mentioned that you like this class. I do too. I mean, I think there's some key positional gets here that are going to improve this for them. Like the offensive line, you have some really nice developmental pieces, Gunnar Gotula and Brock Knutson. I think those guys have a chance to be the bookend tackles. I really like a guy like Omarion Miller as a playmaker for them at wide receiver. And they've had some good gets at wide receiver. Some of those guys are playing right now, but needed to continue to add some offensive firepower. I think they've got that in this class. And really, I think the defensive line group is the one to look at. Cameron Lenhart, Riley Van Poppel, a couple of nice pieces on that defensive line class. Maverick Noonan from inside the state, a legacy guy that I think is a safe bet to be a contributor for them in time. I mean, I think that top to bottom, when you look at this class, I think that you have a really good group here that has committed to them even with some of the uncertainty. So no doubt they have to play better on the field. No doubt they have to prove it to land some guys like Malachi Coleman. But I think when you look at this class and where it sits right now, if you didn't know anything that happened in Ireland over the weekend, you would sit here and say, this is a good group for Nebraska.
That's typically what we say. I think they've done a good job recruiting at Nebraska, and they've been in these close ball games. It's just time to start coming out on top in those games. Maryland, 20 commits right now. Allen, what do you like about the Terrapins class?
Yeah, this one in the past, Mike Loxley has had a lot of star power at the top of the class. There's right now, currently, you don't have that one big standout get that they've always seemed to pick up in those other years. But I think that this is a very balanced class, top to bottom. That's why it's ranked where it is, even without having somebody pulling up the average. From my neck of the woods, they came in and picked up running back Nolan Ray, who I think has a chance to be a really, really good player for them. Comes from a good program at Brother Rice, has good size, has a track background, has gotten faster each year that we've seen him, catches the ball really well out of the backfield. And they've kind of snuck into the Midwest from time to time and picked up a player like this. But in a class where you don't necessarily, like I said, have a one star, I think a guy like Nolan Ray has a chance to become the starter at running back there and be a really, really good player for them. 16
commits for Rutgers right now, headlined by a couple of offensive linemen, Josiah Peterson and John Stone. What is catching your eyes about the Scarlet Knights?
Well, right there first, I've noticed that in this class, they're looking to get bigger. And they're certainly doing that at the offensive line position with those two players also came into Ohio, won a battle for a 6'7" offensive tackle in Dominic Rivera. But then when you even look at the skill players in this class, a guy like Fama Toure or Jess O'Furry, two big receivers, 6'2", 6'3", they are preparing. They have flipped this roster around to where they look getting off the bus like one of the top teams in the conference, and they're doing it again in this class. They are recruiting size, they are recruiting length, they are recruiting athletes, and I think Greg Schiano and his staff have done a really, really good job of flipping the roster since they've gotten back to Rutgers for his second stint.
Wisconsin had a top 20 class in 2021, the top 40, they finished outside the top 40 in 2022. They're outside the top 50 here in 2023. I know that you can go into the portal these days, this day and age, and Wisconsin's also kind of been a program that's been the master of taking what they've gotten and maximizing maximizing their players through great strength and conditioning and scheme. And certainly they've identified some jewels. But I'm a little nervous about Wisconsin football 3 years down the road right now. What do you like about this recruiting class, and should I be nervous?
Yeah, so I think you should be a little bit nervous. I think that you don't want to be last in the conference. You would hope that they would be recruiting better at this point. But then on the flip side, as you mentioned, if there was one program that would make the rankers nervous being at the bottom of the conference, it is Wisconsin, because you know they're going to find some guys that are going to turn out. They will find guys who will walk on and take gray shirts that'll probably turn into starters and possibly NFL guys. And so that formula has not changed for them. And I do think that they found some guys in this class who are going to be gems again when you look at how they've played early in the season. When I started to go through the film of Big Ten commits and who do we need to look at that's possibly going to be moving up, there were several Wisconsin commits on that list. Colin Dixon, a guy who was off to just a really, really fast start in his senior year, wide receiver out of the state of Ohio. Michael Janzi, linebacker out of Illinois, had a really, really outstanding first game as part of a kickoff classic. Nate White from right there in their home state, #1 player in the state of Wisconsin, but him being in the Milwaukee area, being at King High School, I don't know that he always gets the attention he deserves. He scores 5 touchdowns in week 1. I'm going to have a chance to see him live this week. Christopher Turek was a big win for them on the offensive line. They've developed that position really well, but for them to go win a battle when Michigan wanted him, Iowa wanted him, Illinois wanted him, several other major programs wanted Christopher Turek. He's a guy who really, really did a good job this offseason of getting himself in shape after dealing with an injury. So I think he's another really, really good piece of this class. So there's some guys here that I think can inch their way up the rankings as seniors. So no doubt you want to see Wisconsin finish higher than this last spot when we're talking about this class again in December, January, and February. But as you mentioned, they're a school that you've always kind of had to take the recruiting rankings with a grain of salt on.
Illinois 2-6 in the last year of the Lovie Smith era, 5-7 in the first year of the Brett Bielema era. Caden Fegan's the jewel of the class, a 4-star athlete. Notre Dame was recruiting hard early. Some schools like as a running back, some as a linebacker. What do you like about Fegan, and what do you like about Illinois?
Well, about Fegan, I mean, first, you have a guy that big, that fast. He's verified that at several events. He can play multiple positions. This year, they've asked him to play quarterback. So far, so good there. He's returned kicks. He's played linebacker. They're going to find a spot for him. And throughout his career, going back to Wisconsin and his other stops, I think Brett Bielema has done a really, really good job of finding the right home for those kind of multi-positional jumbo athletes. And I like that they're coming into the region more and they're recruiting the state more. That didn't happen under Lovie Smith. And in a short period of time, they've really mended the relationships with the high school programs in the state. When you see them now going into East St. Louis and getting a guy like Antoine Hayden, they go into Wheaton St. Francis and get a guy like TJ McMillan. They are right there battling for Jair Hill. As we mentioned last year, they won several battles inside the state for top guys in the 2022 class. If they can get Jair Hill in this class, I mean, he really becomes the headliner and the jewel in the class. And I think it's still a pretty good class without him. And they've done a great job inside the state, but that's the one moving forward here. If they can get him, and I really do think they have a shot, that really sort of elevates this class.
Indiana 8-5 3 years ago under Tom Allen, 6-2 2 years ago. Had some bad luck last year. Finished 2-10, looking to get back on track Friday night when they open their season against Illinois. They have just 8 commits right now. Amari Farrell's the jewel in the Sunshine State, where Tom Allen and company, they've hit Florida hard traditionally, and he looks like another future difference maker for them. Sam West, an in-state tight end from Greensburg, Indiana, a multi-sport standout who IU beat Tennessee, among others, for. It's a class that's got some talent in it right now, even though it's small.
Yeah, it's a small class. There's not currently, a headliner type guy either. There's not like a Donovan McCulley or a Desan McCullough yet in this class. Maybe they can get one of those guys. I think when you look at their class moving forward, the thing that is positive for Hoosier fans is they had several guys come for official visits in the summer that are still on the board. A couple of defensive linemen from the state of Louisiana, and A.J. Thomas and Tadarius Collins, Jakevian Rogers out of the state of Texas. Those guys were on campus in the summer, still out there, so maybe they can finish out the class with a couple of those gets and help try to pull this class rank up. But Sam West is a guy that you mentioned who I think has a chance to be really, really good. He's played some quarterback. He's played some wide receiver. He's going to grow into a tight end, and that's a position that they've had a lot of success with guys like Peyton Hendershot. Sounds like they're really excited about A.J. Barner and Aiden Steinfeld, and Sam West has a chance to be the next one who comes in and makes an impact at that position.
AT, thanks for coming on Whip Around and making an impact today. Appreciate you coming by. It's going to be a busy fall. For the latest on the recruiting trail, make sure you're tuned into 24/7 Sports and all these Big Ten sites. Please hit the like button on this 24/7 Sports YouTube page so you are up to date on the latest videos we're dropping, whether it's commitments, whether it's preps to pros, whether it's the block, or all the other great shows or interviews that we're lining up on here. So hit that like button so you can stay current on the latest in college football, basketball, college football recruiting, and basketball recruiting. I'm Steve Wiltfong. This was another episode of Whip Around. Thanks for tuning in. And Chris Belcher, Jason, appreciate y'all producing the show.